Hey there, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're taking a look at something that's often completely invisible, something that leaves no outward marks, but can really shape our internal world, our relationships. We're diving deep into emotional neglect, especially, well, when it happens during childhood.
It's such a tough topic because it is so silent, isn't it? Unlike other kinds of harm, neglect is really about an absence. The absence of that crucial emotional support and validation that kids need when they're growing up. And that absence, well, it leaves these profound, lasting imprints.
Exactly. And our mission here for you listening is to understand how that invisible experience can show up, how it manifests in, very real common behaviors we see in adults. We're using insights today from an article called Eight Behaviors of People Who've Been Emotionally Neglected Psychology Insight. It offers a really insightful perspective on this.
It really does. It gives a clear framework for understanding the why behind some patterns. Makes it clear these aren't like character flaws. They're often learned responses to an environment where, well, emotional needs just weren't consistently met.
Right. Okay, so let's unpack this. Let's look at what it looks like in practice based on the source material.
Yeah.
How does this silent lack shape the adult?
Well, one of the first things the article highlights, and it's pretty fundamental, is a struggle for people to even identify or, name their own emotions.
That seems so basic.
hmm
But the source says it's a core issue. Why would that be?
Well, think about it. If you grew up in a home where your feelings were just consistently ignored or maybe dismissed, or even just met with a sort of blank stare, you never really learned the language of emotion. You weren't taught what different feelings felt like, or that they were okay to have, that they were valid. So as an adult, you might feel, I don't know, a general sense of unease or something's off, but you can't quite pinpoint it. Is it sadness, frustration, anxiety? It's hard to tell.
And the source actually puts a name to this, doesn't it? Alexithymia.
Yes, exactly. That's the clinical term the article brings up. This difficulty, sometimes inability to describe emotions clearly. And it's presented as a direct consequence of not having that crucial emotional mirroring, that validation modeled early on. It's like trying to navigate the world without a map because no one ever showed you how to read one.
Okay, wow. So moving from that internal world, how does this play out with other people? The source mentions a really common behavior, apologizing, a lot, even when they haven't done anything wrong.
Ah, yes. This one's really fascinating, and the article explains it so well. It's less about actual guilt or fault, and much more about a deeply ingrained survival strategy. Think, if expressing yourself or even just having needs led to conflict or disapproval or maybe withdrawal from caregivers, you learn to sort of preemptively smooth things over. Apologizing just becomes this automatic reflex, a way to try and diffuse potential tension before it even
It's
starts.
like constantly walking on eggshells, maybe, even years later.
Precisely. It's
Yeah.
often an unconscious thing, yeah. An attempt to avoid triggering those negative reactions they experienced way back.
And I guess this connects to how they view their own needs too, right? The article points out that people who went through this often minimize their own needs.
Absolutely. It follows logically, doesn't it? If your needs were consistently overlooked or maybe treated as unimportant or burdensome, you internalize that message deeply. The source explains this conditioning leads adults to genuinely believe, often unconsciously, that their own emotions, their desires, their needs, they just aren't valid. Or at least not worth addressing. So they push them down, ignore them, sometimes, like the article says, even to the point of burnout, because they truly don't feel they have a right to have those needs met.
Which then sets up this really heartbreaking feeling the source talks about, feeling unworthy of love and attention. Even when people do show them care, maybe it's hard to let it in.
That's exactly right. The article gets to the core of it. It suggests there's often this deep, maybe unconscious belief that something is fundamentally wrong with them. And this belief takes root because that foundational emotional validation just wasn't there. They didn't get the message, you are seen, you are heard, you matter. And that void translates into this pervasive feeling of not being quite good enough, which of course impacts everything: relationships, career, self esteem, you name it.
Wow. It sounds like a constant internal battle. And the article also mentions how this affects their thoughts. Like, they often overthink conversations, worry a lot about rejection.
Yes, this behavior, according to the article, stems from that fear of being too much.
Mhm.
If their attempts at connection or expressing emotion were met with dismissal or misunderstanding in the past, they become hypervigilant, really watchful. They might replay conversations over and over in their minds, dissecting every word, terrified they said something wrong, something that will lead to disapproval or misunderstanding, or ultimately abandonment. That's a big fear.
Hmm. It paints a picture of real social anxiety, always feeling like you're on the verge of messing up.
It does, and that constant internal monitoring, it's exhausting and makes genuine, relaxed connection really difficult.
Okay, and related to that, the article brings up being fiercely emotionally independent, sometimes maybe too independent.
Mm-hmm. This is another one of those protective mechanisms, the source explains. They learned, often very early on, that they just couldn't rely on others for emotional support, for validation. Maybe no one showed up for them in that really crucial way. So eventually, they stopped asking, stopped expecting. They built walls, became incredibly self-reliant. They rarely show vulnerability or ask for help because, well, their experience taught them it was pointless or maybe even unsafe.
So they just learned to expect nothing from others, emotionally speaking.
Pretty much. And the article highlights the painful irony here. Because beneath that strong, capable independence, they still deeply crave connection. We all do. But that learned mistrust makes it incredibly hard to actually lean on anyone to trust that support will be there.
Moving inward again. The seventh point the article raises is this feeling of emptiness,
Hmm.
but an emptiness they can't quite explain.
Yeah, this is a really powerful one. The article describes it as a persistent void, a sense that something crucial is just missing. It's often not a specific negative feeling like sadness or anger, although those might be there too. It's more the absence of that emotional nurturance they needed way back then. They might try to fill this void, with work, achievements, distractions, maybe even unhealthy coping things.
Hmm.
But that fundamental lack of early emotional nourishment can create this enduring sense of internal emptiness. It lingers.
Like a foundational piece is missing from their emotional core.
That's a good way to put it. Exactly.
And then the final behavior, number 8, that the article discusses, finding it hard to comfort others emotionally, which seems a bit counterintuitive, right, given their own likely deep feelings and struggles.
It does seem that way at first glance, but what's fascinating is the article's explanation. It's not about a lack of caring. The source is clear on that. They often care very deeply. But because they were never really shown healthy emotional processing or how to respond effectively to others' emotions, they simply don't know how to react instinctively or comfortably when someone else is showing strong feelings, like, crying or being really upset.
Ah, okay. So the skills for emotional response weren't really taught or practiced.
That's the idea. They might feel awkward or unsure what to say, what to do. Their response might come across as stiff or maybe inadequate, not because they lack empathy, but because they like the learned emotional toolkit for that situation.
Okay. So if we look at the source material, these 8 behaviors, struggling with their own emotions, the apologizing, minimizing needs, feeling unworthy, the overthinking, that fierce independence, the emptiness, and then difficulty comforting others. These paint a common picture, according to the article, of the landscape shaped by childhood emotional neglect.
Yeah, they're presented as common patterns, patterns that reveal how the absence of something essential during development, how that can create really significant challenges in adulthood, impacting self-perception, relationships, just overall well-being.
And thinking about why this matters to you listening, maybe recognizing some of these patterns, either in yourself or perhaps in someone you know, maybe that offers a crucial piece of insight, a different way to look at struggles that might have felt confusing or isolating before. And the article offers a really powerful message, doesn't it, for anyone who identifies with this.
It really does. It drives home this essential truth. You are not broken. You are learning to heal. It reframes these behaviors. They aren't inherent flaws. They're understandable responses. Understandable reactions to a difficult, emotionally depriving environment from the past.
And the source is really clear that while you can't change the past, healing is absolutely possible. It emphasizes that awareness, just this understanding we've been talking about today, that's the crucial first step.
Yes, and the article goes on to suggest paths forward. Things like self-compassion, which is huge, potentially seeking therapy, and consciously working to learn the emotional skills that maybe weren't taught early on. It's about shifting those patterns, building a more fulfilling emotional life. The core message seems to be about internalizing the truth that your feelings do matter, that they deserve to be acknowledged.
So this deep dive into the source material, it really makes it clear. Recovering from emotional neglect isn't about fixing something broken. It's more like learning what wasn't provided. And it starts with that foundational understanding. Your feelings, your needs, they are valid. So the question becomes, with this awareness now, what will you do next?